Hey, it's the Lord of O.R.D. 14 Digital Shaman, Michael Adams. And I'm going to read out of the book Far Journeys from Robert A. Monroe. In particular, chapter 12, most of chapter 12, and chapter 13. And I find this to be the most plausible explanation for why we're here in this place we call the world and earth and our life and our existence. Don't believe there's lessons to be learned. But, and this is the one thing out of this whole book and everything that Robert Monroe has offered us. Maybe there's two things. The most primary thing is obviously his experiences with outer body experiences, OOBE. But in chapter 12 and chapter 13, it talks about Loosh and what we produce through our emotions, and primarily love, and how these ethereal forces and the force, if you will, and a lot of people talk about the super force, right? And the ultimate thing in our life is about love. The ultimate answer to life is about love. And they're right, but I don't think most people realize what it really entails. But I think Robert Monroe was onto something. And it was devastating for him. It took him months to recover from it, if he ever did. And I know that the shills there and the agents in the Monroe Institute have done a good job of just dismissing it. But I think we need to talk about it. Loosh, the purpose of why you and I are here, why we go through all the pain and suffering, and ultimately love, and why we generate love, and the energy, if you will, the frequency of love. And there's these forces, and a force that seems to harvest it like a drug, and they feast upon it. Now what's going on is Monroe is having a dialogue with an entity on the other side that he calls BB. Eventually also the inspects, he talks to them as well. In chapter 13, ultimately they show him the purpose or the reason why we're here in the meat suit, and why this place was created in the first place, and the real purpose for it all, why we live in such a predatory, parasitic environment, world, what Loosh is all about, and how that generates the purest form of Loosh. It is the purpose most likely for life that I found. I know it's not a very pleasant answer, but it makes the most sense. With this whole, if people who claim about, and talk about reincarnation, the problem is we suffer from amnesia. Our memories are swiped clean. We don't remember our previous lives. Karma? Hardly. And why do evil people keep on thriving? And they come back for another life, really? To pay off their debts? Really? They don't even know what they did last. We don't know what we did in our last life if there is reincarnation, which I think there probably is. And I think and people say that we agreed to come here. And I'm sure that is the case. But I do believe, from my research and listening to other people, people like Mark from Conscious Research, sorry Mark, always get yours, Forever Conscious Research channel, and others, a few others, that, yeah, we're here to produce one thing. We're walking factories, batteries, producing frequencies that people talk about, right? Loosh, love. They feed upon it. And we go to the other side, we get love bombed, and we get this overwhelming sense of love, apparently, from what most people say when they have near-death experiences and etc. But not always, but most people talk about it. And it's this, oh, they go to the light and this great feeling of love like they've never felt ever before. Acceptance, love. It's like that's what we're all designed to do, and we keep coming back over and over again to produce this thing called Loosh. Love. That was almost form of it. The pure light. And this super force, what they call God, the all-consuming fire, in the Bible, the Spirit. Yeah, it's all about love. And it will put us through living hell in order for that to obtain its love. It's really bizarre. But it's up to you to make the decision. But listen to what the guy has to say. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense to me. After all the research that I've done, studying, prayer, life experiences, the only thing that makes sense is that we were set up in this meat suit, in this environment, to produce Loosh. The highest grade of Loosh is love. Regardless if they were full of anger, is a form of Loosh. Alright? And all the other feelings and emotions. That's what we're all about. It's something to really think about. Seriously. Because I can tell you one thing. Your pastor doesn't know what he's talking about. The priest doesn't know what he's talking about. The Pope doesn't. I think they might know what the real gig is, but they're not, some of them at the top. Maybe some of them are aware. But for the most part, they're just useful dupes to help produce the Loosh. War, violence, pestilence, plagues, cataclysms. All these stressors to put on us to create Loosh for these other entities that are around us that feed upon. Listen to what this guy has to say. When you're done listening to this guy, it's just me reading it, so please forgive me for my lack of ability to read in an entertaining way, but listen to it and tell me what you think afterwards. Please. I think you might be shocked, disturbed, but it might resonate. Very few people know about this. Very, very, very few people know about the true meaning of what life is. But I believe that this actually pretty much hits the nail on the head as what the true meaning of life is here. It's not a very pleasant answer. It's not meant to make you feel good. But they say the truth will set you free. Somehow this was to help set you free. Mark over at the Forever Conscious Research argues that maybe we should develop this how do I say this? Autonomous, never yielding attitude. Then we go to the other side, they would say, no, we don't want to be part of this stuff anymore. not to buy into it, not to buy into the light, not to buy into the love bombing, not to buy, I would argue not to buy into the freak show that you'll see on the other side. The things that may cause you to feel full of dread and fear. To find yourself, your authentic, autonomous self. I'm doing a terrible job of it, but Mark does a good job of it. Let's do more of it, I wish. And I know you might feel a little jaded from other people using his ideas. I don't blame them. But that's how it goes when you're a trailblazer. That happens to everybody in this Loosh farm that we live in. You know, I know a lot of people that know about this stuff, and they're really angry. I don't see how they don't they realize that for their anger they're helping to produce the Loosh that they and actually feeding the beast. Yeah. There's a lot of things to be pissed off about. There's a lot of things to be angry about. But just remember, I mean, your anger is feeding the beast. Somehow we have to be neutral, like some of the gurus of the East say. To be still, to be present, to accept everything that happens with a smile. Maybe we're just supposed to just make love. Not they say make love, right? Make love, right? Make love. It's not literally just, having intercourse. I mean, literally make love, right? Love's the answer, right? It probably is. The problem is we had learned to manage that. I mean, the feelings, we had needed to not be deceived by it, be tricked by it. Being empathetic and caring and compassionate for others and for our children and our family, if we get a chance to do so, yeah, we should do it, right? It's the right thing to do. Because we don't want to feel the guilt, the remorse, the reason, right? Of not trying, even if we don't, it's not reciprocated. But then again, at the end of the day, it's to be able to, when we get to the other side, that we can hold our head high and say, you know what? Nope. I know I did the best I could. And you guys, where's your accountability? On the other side, where's your accountability? Your archonic forces, your ethereal beings, God itself, the super force. Where's your accountability in all this? How come you don't have to go through all the suffering and pain? But we do. And if you did, why didn't you warn us? And why didn't you explain to each and every one of us what's really going on? Why hide it from us? Why hide the secret? It's very sinister what's going on. But you guys check it out. Tell me what you think about it. I think it's a big answer to the question why we're here. What's the real purpose of life? Then the question still remains, where do we come from and how do they hijack us? How do they kidnap us? How do they deceive us, trick us to come here? The trickster spirit, huh? Our spirits. And then the next question is, how do we not return? Those of us who don't want to return. Some of you do want to return. Maybe you enjoy all the pain and suffering, the games. Maybe you like it. They say there are many that do. I don't like this place. I don't like the system. This is not the place that I belong. I don't belong here. Maybe you feel the same way. I've never felt I've ever belonged here. In more ways than one. Not just simply because of maybe health issues or the way I look or how people, maybe rejected me or whatever it may be, my issues. I just never, even if everything was perfectly aligned for me, right? Everything I ever wanted, right, came true in this life. I still, the inner man, the true essence, who I am, I've never felt right about this place. I've been constantly searching for an answer to why, how. What the heck's going on? A lot of people say you shouldn't ask questions. Go along with it. Go with the flow. I think a lot of times we do go with the flow regardless. We can't fight destiny, predeterminism. But we can say, I do think this. If nothing else, there's got to be some way not to return here. Some way. I mean, I don't agree with this place. I don't agree with this system. I think it's so wrong. But you know, at the end of the day, I can understand the other forces, why they feast upon us. We live, I mean, look what we're forced to do. We're forced to prey off other, literally eat other living forms of life, produce loosh constantly. It's mandatory. I mean, whether it's plants or it's freaking, animals that eat plants, cows, pigs, whatever, birds, you know what I mean? We need that protein just to sustain this meat suit. It's just so predacious. It's like, if I were God and if I was creating a place, would I really create this place? I wouldn't create it. Now I can understand other forces and other beings that would create it because they would see a way of profiteering from it. But I don't want to do that. I'm forced to do it while I'm here, but I don't want to do it. Anyways, check this out. Listen to me. Listen to the reading and tell me what you think about it. I think this is important stuff. Far more important in a day than Bigfoot. Let's put it that way. TSI brochure. Now this is where it starts getting good. The TSI brochure. All about the places and things we would be visiting. All about Earth and humans. How it got started. What it's for. All of that stuff. I closed and opened slowly. They don't match up. Here. Get your new precept. BB tossed a rope at me. I took it and curiously and unfolded it. Click. Someone, somewhere, or both, in millions or uncountable, requires, likes, needs, values, collects, drinks, eats, and uses a drug, sink, a substance, ident, loosh. These someones or some things or somewhere, both and millions or uncountable, require, once again, and like, need, and value, and collect, and drink, eat, and use a drug, a substance called loosh. Electricity, oil, oxygen, gold, wheat, water, land, oil, old coins, uranium. This is a rare substance and somewhere, and those who possess loosh find it vital for whatever it is used for. Faced with this question of supply and demand, a universal law of somewhere, someone decided to produce it artificially, so to speak, rather than search for it in its natural form. He decided, this could be the Demirs, by the way, to build a garden and grow loosh. And that garden is this world, this physical world that we live in. And we are the producers of loosh, as we will learn. In a natural state, loosh was found to originate from a series of vibrational actions in the carbon-oxygen cycle, and the residue was loosh in varying degrees of purity. It occurred only during such acts production, and secondarily during the reactive process. Prospectors from somewhere ranged far and wide in search of Loosh sources, and new discoveries were hailed with much enthusiasm and reward. So it was that someone and his garden changed all this. Far off in a remote area, he set to work on his experiment. First, he created a proper environment for the carbon-oxygen cycle where it would flourish. He created a balance with much care so that proper radiation and other nourishment would be in continuous supply. He then tried his first crop, which actually did produce Loosh, but only in small quantities and of comparatively low grade, and not significant enough to take back to the heart of somewhere. The problem was twofold. The life period was too short and the crop units themselves were too minute. This brought about limits of quantity, as the crop had no time to generate Loosh in such close tolerance. Moreover, the Loosh could be harvested only at the moment of termination of the lifespan, not one moment before. His second crop was no better, if as good. He changed the environment to another part of the garden, where the density was gaseous rather than liquid, and the higher density chemicals formed a solid base, and these were still available. He planted numerous units and many varieties in a new form, with a great increase in size, some many thousands of times larger and more complex than the simple unicellular first crop. He reversed the carbon-oxygen cycle, yet all had a basic uniformity. Like the first crop, they would reseed at regular intervals and terminate their lifespans automatically. To avoid the uneven distribution of chemicals and radiation, which had been prevalent in the first crop, he immobilized the second crop. Each was designed to stay principally in its own section of the garden. To this end, each was given firm tendrils, which burrowed deep in the more dense chemical matter. Attached to this was a stem or trunk, which helped elevate the upper portion upward for its share of needed radiation. So we're talking about plants now, right? Trees. I wonder if that's the reason at the end of the day they chopped down the giant trees. Years, hundreds of maybe thousands and maybe millions of years ago. As an added thought, brilliant color radiators accompanied by small particle generators were mounted on each unit, usually near the top or symmetrically centered. He set up circulating patterns in the gaseous envelope around the crop, principally the aid to the reseeding process. Later, he discovered that the same turbulent effect served as a means of harvesting the Loosh. It was the turbulence. If the turbulence were violent enough, the crop would be blown down, the lifespan terminated, the loosh would be discharged. This was especially useful when an immediate loosh supply was desired at a particular point rather than at harvest time. Despite all this, the second crop was most unsatisfactory. While it was true that a much greater quantity was attained, the unrefined loosh produced was of such low grade that it was scarcely worth the effort. In addition, the growth period was now too long and no increase of quality resulted. Some vital element was missing. Someone hovered over his garden for a long period and study before he attempted the third crop. It was indeed a challenge. True, he was particularly successful. He had grown loosh, yet the product his efforts fell far short of the wild, uncultivated variety. It was inevitable that he perceived the answer. The third crop was living proof of this truth. The original carbon-oxygen cycle must be included. Mobility must be restored. Both factors had shown great promise in high-grade loosh production. If size could be added to this, much could be accomplished. With this plan in the forefront, someone removed various sample units from the first crop, which was still thriving in the liquid portion of the garden. He modified them to exist and grow in the gaseous area. He adapted them first to take nourishment from the second crop, which he permitted to abound for this very purpose. Thus it was, at the first of the mobiles, the third crop came into being. The mobiles took nourishment from the second crop, thus ending its lifespan and producing low-grade loosh. When each huge mobile terminated its own lifespan, additional loosh was produced. The quantity was massive, but the frequency pattern of the loosh residue still left much to be desired. So obviously, like the second crop would be the plants. The new third crop would be plant eaters, whether dinosaurs or whatever it may be, and larger entities, right? It was by accident that someone came up with the prime catalyst as regards loose production. The monstrous and slow-moving mobiles had a lifespan far out of proportion to their nourishment input. The growth and life termination process was of such length that soon the mobiles would all but decimate the second crop. The entire garden would be out of balance, and there would be no loosh production whatsoever. Both the second and third crop faced extinction. As the second crop grew scarce, energy needs of the mobiles became acute. Often two mobiles would seek to ingest the identical second crop unit. This created conflict, which resulted in physical struggle among two or more of the ungainly mobiles. Someone observed these struggles, at first bemused with the problem. Then, with great interest, as the struggle ensued, the mobiles were emitting, stop that, were emitting Loosh. So once again, as the struggle ensued, the mobiles were emitting Loosh. Not in fractional amounts, but in sizable, usable quantities, and of a much higher purity. He quickly put the theory to the test. He removed another unit of the first crop from the liquid garden area and redesigned it for the gaseous environment, but with one significant change. The new mobile would be somewhat smaller, but would require the ingestion of other mobiles for nourishment. This would solve the problem of overpopulation of the mobiles, and at the same time would create good quantities of usable Loosh during each conflict struggle, plus a bonus. If the new class of mobiles terminated the lifespan of the other, someone would be able to transmit to somewhere practical amounts of reasonable pure Loosh. Thus it was that the rule of the prime catalyst came into being. Conflict among carbon-oxygen cycle units, as you and I, and all the animals on this godforsaken place, bring forth constant emissions of Loosh. It was as simple as that. Satisfied that he had found the formula, someone prepared the fourth crop. He knew now that the third crop mobiles, which were too large and too long in lifespan to be ultimately practical. If grown in large numbers, the entire garden would have to be expanded and enlarged. There was not space enough to grow such massive single units, and the proportionate leafy second crops to support them. As he reasoned correctly, that more rapid and increased mobility would expand the conflict factor with a resultant higher loose output. In one single motion, someone terminated the lifespan of all the lumbering third crop mobiles. Going back to the first crop and the liquid area, he modified and expanded them into a multitude of shapes and sizes, gave them complex multicellular structures of high mobility. He designed into them a pattern of balance. And there were those that ingested the second crop type of carbon cycle units, basically immobile, as an energy source. There were others, very highly mobile, who required for energy the ingestion of the other mobile modified first crop units. The complete cycle operated quite satisfactory. The stationary secondary crop modification in the liquid environment, obviously we're talking about the sea and the oceans, the lakes, right, flourished. Small, highly active liquid breathing mobiles took nourishment, ate the second crop modification, large and or other active mobiles, consumed for energy the small plant eaters. When any mobile grew too large and slow, it became an easy target for the smaller mobiles, who attacked it ferociously in ferocious numbers. The chemical residue from these ingestive actions settled to the bottom of the liquid medium and so provided new nourishment for the stationaries, modifying second crop, completing the circuit. The result was a steady flow of loosh from the lifespan termination of the stationaries, from the intense conflict among the mobiles to avoid ingestion, and finally from the sudden termination of the lifespan of such mobiles as an inevitable product of such conflicts. Turning to another portion of the garden, the gaseous area, with a dense compound base, someone applied the same techniques with even more advanced improvement. He added many varieties of stationaries, originally second crop, to provide sufficient and diverse nourishment for the new mobiles he was to create. As in the other garden area, he made such mobiles into a balance of two species, those who ingested and drew energy from the second crop stationaries, and those who required other mobiles for subsistence. He created them in literally thousands of original types, small, large, and yet none so large as the third crop mobiles. And ingeniously gave each some opportunity for conflict. Is that how to pronounce that? A pure opportunity for conflict. These took the form of mass, elusive seeds, deceptive and or protective coding, color radiation, wave action, and particle perceptors and detectors, unique higher density protuberances for gording and gashing and rending during conflict. All of the latter served neatly to add to and prolong the conflict periods, with the result increase in loose emission. As a side experiment, someone designed and created one form of mobile that was weak and ineffective by the standards of other mobiles of the fourth crop. Yet, this experimental mobile had two distinct advantages. It had the ability to ingest and take energy from both stationary and other mobiles. Second, someone pulled forth a piece of himself, no other source of such substance being known or available, to act as an intensive ultimate trigger to mobility. Following the rule of attraction, someone knew that such infusion would create in this particular mobile species an unceasing mobility. Always it would seek to satisfy the attraction this tiny mote of himself engendered, as it sought reunion with the infinite whole. So obviously, like a female and a male, reproduction, right? And all that goes along with it, right? Survival, just pass on the seed. Okay, thus the drive for satisfaction of energy requirements through ingestion would not be the only motivating force. More important, the needs and compulsions created by the peace of someone could not be saturated through the garden. Thus, the need for mobility would be ever present, and the conflict between this need and that energy replacement would be constant, possibly to continuous higher order Loosh emitter if it survived. The fourth crop exceeded all of someone's expectations. It became apparent that a constant useful flow of Loosh was being produced in the garden. The balance of life operated perfectly with the conflict factor, producing immense amounts of Loosh and a steady supplement brought into being by the constant lifespan termination from all types of mobiles and stationaries. To handle the output, someone set up special collectors to aid in the harvest. He set up channels to convey the raw Loosh from his garden to somewhere. No longer did somewhere depend primarily upon the wild state as principal source of Loosh. The garden of someone had ended that. With the success of the garden and the production of Loosh by cultivated means, others began to design and build their gardens. This was in accordance with the law of supply and demand. Vacuum is an unstable condition. As the amount of Loosh from someone's garden only partially met the requirements of somewhere, collectors on behalf of the others actually entered the garden of someone to take advantage of those small emissions of Loosh overlooked and ignored the collectors of someone. Someone, his work completed, returned to somewhere and occupied himself with other matters. Loosh production stayed at a constant level under the supervision of the collectors. Only alterations were ordered by someone himself. Under the instructions of someone, the collectors periodically harvested segments of the fourth crop. This was done to ensure adequate chemical, radiation, and other nourishment for the younger oncoming units. The secondary purpose was to provide occasional extra amounts of Loosh created by such harvesting. To reap such harvest, the collectors generated storms of turbulence and turmoil in both the gaseous envelope and the more solid chemical formations that were the base of the garden itself. Such upheavals had the effect of terminating lifespans of multitudes of fourth crop as they were crushed under their rolling base foundation and smothered under waves of the agitated liquid area of the garden. By peculiarity of design, fourth crop units could not maintain their carbon-oxygen cycle surrounded by the liquid medium. The garden pattern of life might have gone on thus throughout eternity had it not been for the perception and inquisitiveness of someone. On occasion, he would study samples of Loosh from his garden, and there was no motive to do so, other than the fact that someone may have held a remote a continuing interest in his project. On a particular analysis of a Loosh sample, someone had casually examined the emissions and was about to return to the reservoir when he became aware of a difference. It was very slight, but there it was. All right, his interest centered immediately. He looked again, woven delicately in with the more common Loosh emanations was a slender fragment of purified and distilled Loosh. This was an impossibility. Purity in distilled Loosh resulted only after the wild state Loosh had been processed many times. The Loosh from the garden of someone required the same treatment before it could be used. Yet, here it was, so finely graded in its refined radiation that it could and would not return into compound with the raw substance. Someone reaffirmed his test, and the result still was positive. There was a factor in his garden of which he was unaware. Quickly, someone left somewhere and returned to his garden. Outwardly, all seemed the same. Solid-based gaseous areas of the garden were an endless carpet of green reflection from the thriving second crop. Modified first crop in the liquid area was in perfect accord with the action-reaction law, a division of cause and effect. Someone perceived without delay that the difference, the source of distilled Loosh, lay neither in the first nor the second crop. He found his first momentary touch of distilled Loosh emanation in one of the units of the fourth crop, which by then had filtered throughout the plantings of the second crop. The flash came during the unusual action of this unit as it entered into a life-terminating struggle with another fourth crop unit. This alone would not create distilled Loosh. Someone knew, and he probed deeper for the source. It was at that moment he discovered the difference. The fourth crop unit was not struggling in conflict over an ingestible remnant of a weaker fourth crop unit or a tasty frond from the nearby second crop stem, or to avoid termination of life and ingestion by other conflicting fourth crop units. It was in conflict to protect and save from life termination three of its own newly generated species huddled under a large second crop unit waiting for the outcome. There was no doubt about it. This was the action that produced the flashes of distilled Loosh. And I think units, I'm thinking of husband, wife, and child, right? With this clue, or male, female, and offspring, right? Someone examined the actions of the fourth crop's units in the garden. He found similar flashes when other fourth crop units took the same action in defense of their young. Still, there was an inconsistency. The sum of all such flashes of distilled loose emanation from all such actions by the current fourth crop units would not amount to half the total he had found in the sample of the reservoir. It was obvious. Another factor was present. Systematically, he hovered over the garden, the world, and extending his perception to all the areas, and almost immediately he found the source. Higher order distilled loose radiation was originating from one particular section of the garden. Quickly he hurried to the spot. There it was, an experimental modified fourth crop unit, one of those that contained a piece of himself in its functional pattern. It was standing alone under a leafy upper portion of a large second crop unit tree, right? It was not hungry. It was not in conflict with another fourth crop unit. It was not acting in defense of its young. Then why did it emit distilled loose in such great quantities? Someone moved closer. His perception entered into the modified fourth crop unit. And then he knew. The unit was lonely. It was this effect that produced distilled loose. Lonely. That's you and I. That's one of the reasons why it's so important to overcome loneliness. To become because once you are at peace with loneliness, they have problems, right? They've had problems with units like me. As someone drew back, he noted another unusual inconsistency. The modified fourth crop unit suddenly had become aware of his presence. It had collapsed and just jerked in strange convulsions on the solid base formation. Clear liquid was being expelled from the two radiation perceiving orifices. All right. With this, the distilled loose emitted became ever more pronounced. It was from this that the someone propounded, his now famous DLP formula, which is in effect in the garden at this time. The balance of the story is well known. Someone included the fundamental of his formula. The creation of pure distilled loose is brought forth in type 4M units by the action of unfulfillment, but only if such pattern is enacted at a vibratory level above sensory bounds of the environment. The greater the intensity of said pattern, the greater the output of loose distillate. To put the formula into effect, someone designed subtle changes in his garden, all of them familiar to every historian. The splitting of all the crop units into halves to engender loneliness as they sought to reunite. The encouragement of dominance of the type 4M unit are but two of the most noteworthy innovations. As it appears now, the garden is a fascinating spectacle of efficiency. The collectors have long since become masters of the art of the DLP formula. Type 4M units dominate and have spread throughout the entire garden. That's us, folks. With the exception of the deeper portions of the liquid medium, These are the principal producers of Loosh distillate. From experience, the collectors have evolved an entire technology with complementary tools for the harvesting of Loosh from Type 4M units. The most common have been named love, friendship, family, greed, hate, pain, guilt, disease, pride, ambition, ownership, possession, sacrifice, and on a larger scale, nations and provincialism, wars, famine, religion, machines, freedom, industry, trade, to list a few. Loosh production is higher than ever before. Like I said, this place was perfectly designed for what it's meant to be. It was closed tightly, turned inward, stunned. My first reaction was there had to be some mistake. This was not the history of Earth. BB had it mixed up with some other port of call on their cruise schedule. Yet as I ran the road again, the overlay of what little I knew of Earth's zoology and human history was uncomfortably accurate, albeit from another perspective. The food chain of the Earth's ecobiologic system had been well established. Knowing this about Mother Nature, some of the hardcore philosophic speculators had often pondered where the human animal fit in the process. To downsize was obvious. Who ate us? Before, it had been just that, speculation. Now, BB open replied, "You get the precept, Ram?" I doled, "Yeah, I get it." "Well then," BB went on, "what's Loosh got to do with learning?" I opened slightly. "And you got the rote before you came to Earth." BB smoothed. "Like I gave you, it was in the TSI cruise brochure. It was, and with hundreds of other rotes we got before we left." I opened more, but tightly. "Where did the brochure come from?" "Why, yeah, from the cruise director." "Where did he get it?" BB flickered. "I don't have a road on that. He just dumped them on us and rolled. Here's the exciting, interesting stops we'll make on the cruise. I got a good precept because it was the last one we'd visit, so it was the last road we got. That's why it's so clear. Some of the others are dim because they were in the middle. Not the Earth road or humans. It's all clean, not wild at all." I hardened. "And where did the cruise director come from?" BB lightened. "Oh, he and the rest are a bunch of curls, a bunch of curls from the system next to us." "Why did they offer the cruise to you at KT-95? BB smoothed. "Well, it was sort of a trade. We got it all in time with systems near us." "What did they get in trade?" BB lightened. Games. We got more games than any other system for skips and any direction." I turned inward and closed. It was getting too hot to handle. If the rote was real, a huge if, I began to drop off anger, the feeling of being on the receiving end of a huge deception. That's right. So damn place is deception. The reset at the being manipulated. Wanted to strike out at those who were conning me, us, all humans, who were taking something from us without our consent or permission. What happened to the freedom of idea? Was every thought and action we took guided? No, directed and controlled just to produce more loot, whatever that was, for a breakfast table or a fuel tank and a somewhere? And what could I do about it? Even knowing, I doled deeply and dropped off more and more. Hey, Ram, BB is fading rapidly. Where are you going? Return to the physical was near instantaneous, exactly as if I had pushed a panic button, which I had not done for so long. Strong sense of tiredness, both mental and physical. Neglected at check time to return. Low energy, no desire to do anything. Unable to get to sleep. Got up, went to the kitchen, made a cup of coffee, sat and stared at the cup. With no energy and desire for exploration during the 2 weeks following, in a depressed state, the only production that surfaced was, it is sunset. The Guernsey, if I'm pronouncing it right, Guernseys? The Guernsey has walked many miles around the pasture of his forage for food. The grass has been more lush today here, though she did not bother to consider why. She had come through the gate calmly when he directed her to do so, instead of the gate across the road. He knew she would find better grass here, and that was why he moved her here. Though she did not realize it, she only did what he directed. But now at sunset it is time again. She must go to her place. There is a goading pain on her underside that tells her this. At his place up the hill, it is cool, and there is more food. He will take the pain anyway. The Guernsey moved up the hill and waits beside his place. Soon the gate will open, and she will walk into her position and his place, and eat the grass he places before her. While she eats, he will relieve the pain until morning. After that, the man will walk away with white water and a round container. The Guernsey does not know where he got the white water, nor why he desired it. Not knowing, she doesn't care. It took, and then we go into the shock treatment. It took me several months to adjust to so this is several months, not weeks. I've been hearing stuff like several days, several weeks, or it says here several months, to adjust to the Loosh rope. Adjust is a very broad word to describe the complete cycle of shock, rejection, anger, depression, resignation, and acceptance. My sequence paralleled remarkably the pattern of others have discovered in studies as to human response when notified of approaching death from illness or injury. Something was dying in me. I had long realized that the God of my childhood did not exist, at least not in the form and substance envisioned by my enculturation. However, I had deeply accepted the concept of a creator and created, and I had but to look around me at the elaborate and intricate order of design, of this symbiosis that made the whole process operate. The trees that grew plumb line straight up if given the chance. That provided me and other oxygen breathers with what we needed while we fed to them unknowingly for a long period our waste products with which they needed to exist. The balance of the entire planet, whose outer filtering bands of energy permitted just the proper quantity and quality of sunlight to so critical to biologic growth and, of course, the food chain. The Loosh wrote explained everything very neatly. Most important, it explained the purpose, the reason for it all, and why it is. This factor had long eluded me. The Loosh answer was simple and obvious. The reason was there, in very prosaic fashion. We were indeed producing something of value. Loosh. If one finally was able to get past the emotional barrier involved, it became hard even then to find holes in the general concept, an explanation of total human behavior and history. That left the inspects. Were they the gardeners, the loose collectors, or the overseers? The inspects. Question tantalized and tortured me for many weeks before I finally decided I must find out one way or another. On a particular night, after a great difficulty of getting 2 cycles of sleep, I awoke with a start and lay quietly in bed. Evidently, my fear of what I might find was greater than I thought. As I unhooked with difficulty from the physical, then slipped out the second body as it hovered, I scanned for the inspect homing signal, but there was none. This disconcerted me at first, but I was determined and foolhardy. I used the indent inspect, the total rote I had on them, stretched out, focused, and let go. There was a quick and short sense of spinning movement, no impression of passing through the rings, then deep blackness, and I was motionless, nothing more. The precept was forming that the intent I had used wasn't enough. I might be at the gate to inspect territory, but I didn't have the passport to enter. I had never tried to go to them. They had always met me. I had no precept of their reality state, therefore I had arrived only at the site of our meetings. If I focused on, a warm vibration washed through me. Very good, Mr. Monroe. You are quite correct. I began to relax somewhat. At least I had gotten this far, and at least they didn't call me Ram. Perhaps you would like it better if we used the ident by which we know you best. We believe you are ready for it now. Ready for it. a name they used. They knew me best. What could that be? Ashanine? I guess it was an Ashanine. Ashanine, if I'm saying it right. Ben Ashanen? Maybe it's Ashanen. Ashanen. I'm going to say the Ashanen. It was both familiar and strange. Again, the feeling of trying to recover from the severe amnesia and the gentle patience of those trying to help me remember, but the Loosh. We are aware of the disturbance you have undergone. It was necessary that you experience this. It goes with the territory, as you put it. Then the Loosh wrote was real. I began to flicker. It is the translation that is not real. The difficulty of placing earth and human values properly into perspectives and energies that are not of time and space is a factor very, very familiar to you. I turned inward, picked up the Loosh wrote Loosh, an energy generated by all organic life in varying degrees of purity, the clearest and most potent coming from humans, engendered by human activity, which triggers emotion, the highest of such emotion being love. Is love Loosh? Continues Ashanin, or Ashanin, or something like that. Ashanin, I'm just going to call it Ashanin. But according to the rote, Loosh is thrown off when life ends its physical existence, when pain occurs, anger, hate. These can't be the same as love. How would you define love in your terms? I know that would be next in the order of things. I couldn't come up with an answer. Throughout history, great minds and greater philosophers had given it a try, with only partial success. I was none of these. I wouldn't even consider trying. But you know it exists. Love is not an illusion. I released the Loosh wrote and turned deeply inward, scanning. It was easier for this perspective, from this perspective. Or perhaps it was the presence of the inspect energy. It presented itself much as a simultaneous mixture and sequence of musical chords and short melodies. Only it wasn't sound. It was patterns of color, of light, scattered among the clutter of harmony, dissonance, discord, excitement, fun, fear, and emotion, and beginning shortly after birth. I had the precept of occasional surges of white, first from my mother and father, then smaller flashes I was unable to identify as to source. I kept scanning through my early years for a slight glimmer of white originating in me. That I put forth. To my dismay, all I could find was one small white glow for an aerial dog named Pete. It was certain that the girl in high school, what was her name? Not even a flicker, either way. Most common misconception, early manifest survival drive. I agreed, yet I could understand why. The bright red or pink chords and urgent melody were impressive even from this viewpoint. No wonder an ignorant curl such as I would come up with the wrong precept. I went on through the mess that was I in the fast forward mode. I could spot sure and solid white surges here and there, of which I had then been unaware. Their reality depressed and saddened me, because I found no significant emission from me that was remotely similar. It was all coming in. I took it and didn't respond. I finally cut it off. Would go into it no further. I wasn't much for a Loosh producer. Too many other color chord patterns and melodies. Except for now. I knew some strong emissions in a few points were coming out of me. Did it take that long? You understand waveforms all come from the same baseline. The colors and white, the difference of frequency and amplitude. I knew what they were doing. I appreciated it. My focus was being diverted from what I thought was unpleasant back into an abstract yet trunk and roots position, using the same stuff, interactive experience. One begins to learn to express anger, pain, fear, and all the rest, and finally, hopefully, if you pass the course, a special energy waveform labeled love. Yet, we don't really know what it is, and with my suspicion growing how to really use it. A carefully designed school of compressed learning to learn to be high quality loose love producers. The fact that human physical consciousness was for the most part totally unaware of being involved in the process may be an important ingredient itself. Precious few are cognizant of the non-physical agenda, at least overtly. It was getting pretty heavy on my cognizance, yet I began to get a very faint precept, elusive, but it was there. What would happen if the Guernsey cow did discover that her milk had value? What could she herself do with it if she didn't have a calf to feed it to? Could she save it? Could she spend it on more hay and protein vitamin blocks to lick? What if she then discovered man was taking the milk she produced? Rebel refused to deliver any more milk. Then she would no longer have a pasture in which to graze. Protection from wild dogs, a bowl when she needed it, and most of all, no barn to go to where she could get relief from the pain. Without a sense of serial time, she forgets that the pain eases eventually, perhaps even knowing she wouldn't care. She wouldn't want to mess up a good thing. Therefore, who cares? Who would care? To use your term, you can't beat the machine. The precept was still there, faint and still be explained and satisfied. What about those who do beat the machine? There always has to be exceptions. No machine is perfect. Only one anomaly is needed to prove a statistic or create one? Are they carted off to be ground up into hamburger meat? If so, is hamburger a sort of super Loosh and something entirely different? Or something entirely different? Is this also a part of the machine product? Or is it rust that is scraped away and discarded? The bull calves, what is their role? Never will be Loosh producers. It takes only one bull for every 50 cows, so there's a surplus. And nature, the machine, left alone, there is always that automatically taken care of. The impersonality of the prospect of dominance and predation, is certainly not in the winning column. Hold it there. The precept is getting stronger. There would be no Loosh production without at least one bull. So he is an indirect Loosh producer, vital to the method. That would infer so are grass, hay, water, minerals, and the rest. Remember your waveforms, beat frequencies you liked so much. Let's see here. If a smart transmitter propagates certain waves, they can resonate with other related vibrations of like kind to form a multiple pattern which, if thought of as light, would be white. So in and of itself, you don't have to be the end product antenna or transducer, just one of the oscillators. You may never display actual Loosh radiation, but you have the vital part in its production. Remembering the scan of my early years, I felt much better. Then why are you disturbed? The precepts still itched inside me. They were right. What would I do with Loosh love if I had a larger warehouse full of it? Hand it out? It would only come back with interest, and I would have to build another warehouse to hold the compounding growing volume. And the precept surged brightly. It was obvious. Someone somewhere, if I could. You are not ready at this point. Ready to go to somewhere? To meet someone? And all this? How do you fit in, my friend? If I had the courage to ask these. We are not someone, as you put it, nor are we from somewhere. You indicate. Also, we are not the keepers of the garden of earth, nor the gardeners, nor do we collect and transfer human developed Loosh energy. See what's going on here. Elsewhere or when we do not fit into any portion of the human compressed learning process. However, we have observed it generation and growth from its inception. We do participate when needed without interrupting the learning sequence. Such need is expressed when there is blockage in the flow. Such participation ultimately serves a vital need for us. I had a need to ask the question, is Somewhere is not the heaven of your history. It was created, as were all the other systems. Then someone is a creator who was created. You are a creator who was created. Each of you does carry a small rote, as you call it, of someone who created you. Through the rote of someone you created, you carry the precept of the creator who created someone. I turned inward, and even with this viewpoint, it was hard to set aside serial logic. The easy precept was how the multitude of distortions, misconceptions, misdirections came about. A little knowledge can be dangerous, and human creative imagination took over from there. If there had not been a someone, humans would not exist. I went over the idea of Loosh/love. It must be quite a place to handle that much Loosh. This somewhere. It would fall neatly into many concepts of heaven. I grew wistful. Maybe we would go just to the edge of somewhere so I could get the feel of the place/state where there was so much love, surely near it, but not in it, just to observe from a distance. It would answer so much. That is not too much to ask, Mr. Monroe. We can arrange it. Close tightly. Click. Even closed tightly, the radiation was so strong that it was nearly unbearable. I felt as if sweat was pouring off me. I was melting, but it wasn't heat. It began to heave like great raking sobs, and I couldn't understand why. Then the radiation eased. I opened a little, and there was a form between me and the radiation, shielding me. I could perceive the corona effect all around the form from the radiation beyond. It reminded me deeply of religious paintings I had seen, only this was live and in something far different from pigmented color. This is as close as you can tolerate. We are diverting most of the effective energy patterns, which are in themselves only the random residue, the leakage, as you might call it, from the fundamental focus through us rather than the outer rim. It will help. With great difficulty, I narrowed and held on the center of the form. I began to cool and calm. Slowly, my rationale and observing self began to merge again, dominating the overwhelming emotional surge that had enveloped me. It was as if I perceived through the darkly tinted window, and I had to work continually to keep the emotion below the threshold level. The wondrous and brilliant joy, awe, reverence melted into one, yet with flashes of each sparking momentarily, all coursing through me as I responded to the radiation, unable to prevent it and barely keeping it under control. This would most emphatically be the ultimate heaven, the final home. Observe more carefully. You are capable of doing so. I looked through the smoke glass shield. That was my inspect friend, and I was grateful, for I knew if I responded to this degree from just a reflection, the leakage from the full force of the radiation would have shattered me. I was not ready for it. If this was the precept from the distant edge, there, in the long view, was a radiant living form of incredible size. My first precept, that of a tall standing humanoid, arms outstretched in front, palms upward, but just as quickly it was not. Instead, a shining globe, edges indistinct. Behind it another, identical in appearance, and behind it another, and continuous cascade moving away into infinity. Beyond my perceptibility, each came numberless beams and rays, some huge in their diameter and others no wider than a pinpoint, all uniform in size throughout their length, and beyond my percept as to their destination, and some of them moving past me so close that I felt I could reach out and touch one. What would you like to do? Would you like to do so? We will help you if needed. I hesitated. Then, with a warm assurance from the shielding inspect form, I stretched a part of me out cautiously and touched the smallest ray nearest me. In an instant, the shock spread throughout all of what I thought I was, and I knew, and knowing, knew that I would forget if I tried to remember, because what I was could not yet handle the reality of it. Yet I never again would be the same, even without remembering, except that it occurred, and the indescribable joy of knowing only that it did take place, and the echoes would reverberate in me throughout eternity, whatever my eternity was. Gently I felt myself being detached from the ray, and I clasped behind the shielding from my inspect friend. Inspect. I realized then how provincial my precepts were. I also realized how limited they were. The radiating globes and the ray emitted. You responded very well for the initial exposure. Your human loosh/love energy is transmuted into the center of what you perceive. From there, it is redirected into what you call rays, to points where it is needed most. Then you have progressed. We guide you to one of the destinations so you can observe the results. My precept was not strong enough to bring any flicker whatsoever as to what exposure to the full force of such rays might be, but my human curiosity wouldn't let the basic question go unanswered. Now that I had smoothed somewhat, it was created. It was always there. We have no precept of the beginning. Are you ready to return now? I turned inward and closed tightly. Click. We were back again in familiar blackness, and only now it seemed empty and sterile. But the inspect energy was still beside me, and now I knew. Now I would have to put together a new indent for them if they could hold up so calmly under. Inspect will serve as well as others, but I couldn't tell it alone. I couldn't let alone, excuse me. Blah, blah, blah. As shaken as I was, I knew I had to ask, because I had known they were greater, but how greater now might be a depth. We are created just as you are created. More than that, it is important that you obtain from your own precept and your own, how do you put it, time. You will find the reason for this. Suddenly I felt a strong urgent signal pulling at my back, at the back of me. I resisted at first, not wanting to leave, but the signal was persistent. With the warm pattern of understanding from my inspect friends, I turned and followed the signal. Instantly, I was hovering over my physical body. There below me was my second body. I slid into it easily, then into the physical. My right arm was tingling due to lack of circulation. I eventually had been lying on it at an angle. I flexed the arm several times, musing as I had so many times before. Suppose there was no signal to return. How long would I stay away? Would I never return? It was then, lying there in the darkness, listening to the whippoorwill, and the night crickets outside, the soft earth's, oh my gosh, scented breeze. So soft, let me try this sentence again. It was then, lying there in the darkness, listening to the whippoorwill and the night crickets outside, the soft earth-scented breeze flowing in through the open window, feeling the hot warmth of our little dog Steamboat sleeping contently against the soles of my feet, the even breathing of Nancy sleeping beside me, that I felt the wetness of my cheeks and a few remaining tears in my eyes. I remembered, not much, but I remembered. I sat up in bed, wanting to jump up and shout in incomprehensible joy. Steamboat raised his head and looked at me curiously, then dropped back. My wife shift position as I sat up, then gradually resumed her even breathing rhythm. I would not wake her. She needed her rest and recharge. I lay back and remembered something. Sometime before dawn, I, too, fell asleep. One easy lesson. And I'll take a break here and go from there. But I think this, if I stop right there, it's good. It's 2 hours, so I should cut this in 2 sections anyways. Loosh. You read these 2 chapters and you think about what you just read, and if you can, it's a little some thinking and pondering on what you just read, and you know that's exactly what you're about. Why you're here, at least. Loosh.